Good to go.
Mr. Chairman, we're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Today is Monday, October 21st, 2024, and I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. Notice of the October committee meetings of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy, including date, time, and location, has been properly noticed, and copies of the agenda were posted to the Board of Accountancy website on Friday, October the 11th, 2024. Individuals who wish to make a public comment on an item listed on the posted agenda during the scheduled public comment period will need to sign in on the provided sign-in sheet, which in this case is at the back of the room, or by placing their name in the chat box online. And Karen, you will monitor the chat box for us today. The public comment period will take place at the end of the meeting. Today's meeting consists of 3 of the board's 4 committees, plus a report from a task force and their various agenda items. The full board meeting will take place tomorrow, October 22nd, beginning at 8:30 a.m. And just a side note, I would encourage you to be here no later than 8 a.m. tomorrow for a coffee that we will have with a potential candidate. So try to be here by 8 in the morning if possible. We've had a lot of change since our last meeting, and of course, Wendy's resignation, and I'm personally so happy for Wendy. I know that most of you, all of you are too. Karen and Laura and I talked about this some. We're sad to see that Wendy left us, but it's a great opportunity for Wendy. Speaks highly of her, and so she would want us to move forward and to keep our positive attitudes, and so we will do that. And in fact, Wendy provided, as you would expect, a lot of the material for today's meeting, including she started the agenda for both the committee and the board meetings for us. We've had to modify them some, but and just a quick note on that. Wendy was aware that I was traveling to Europe in early September, and Wendy knew that she needed to notify me, or wanted to notify me and the board of her resignation, but wanted to talk with me first. And so because of my trip to Europe, she notified me in late August, and then a day or two later, she sent the email to the full board. But I was really not able to communicate with you because of the sunshine rules. So we will talk some today about a lot has happened since Wendy's resignation, and we certainly will give you an update on all that has happened since that time. But also, in addition to that change, we also have 2 new board members, and we welcome Brad and Mike. And at this time, I would ask, Brad, do you mind to introduce yourself? Just tell us a little about yourself, please.
Thank you to my good friend Jack here for showing me how to use the mics. But thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. Brad Buchanan, a partner, professionally a partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers here in Nashville. Jack and I were just talking. My background is in audit. Specifically, I spent my 20-plus years doing financial services companies in our banking capital markets practice, which is bank, capital markets, asset managers, those kinds of businesses. Anything other than insurance would be sort of in my wheelhouse. So have 3 children, happily married with 3 children. My oldest is for those of you who are Tennessee natives, he opted not to go to UT, much to my chagrin, and is now in the University of Montana, which I can understand as well. And then I have a 10th grade daughter and a 6th grade son.
Thank you. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
And also, we have Mike Parton. Mike and I have known each other for a number of years, but Mike, will you introduce yourself also?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and be part of the board. My name is Mike Parton. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee. I've been with Coulter & Justice since the start of the firm 31 years ago. The last 13 years, I've served as the managing partner. I'm in my last 2 years of working as a partner until my retirement, I'm no longer the managing partner as of last month, so I am an accounting, consulting, and assurance partner. So that's sort of sums up the day job, if you will. Appreciate the opportunity to meet everybody and serve the state and to be part of this.
Thank you, Mike. Mike and I also had the opportunity, among other things, during our careers to be on the board together at Leadership Knoxville. So Mike and I, as I said, have known each other for a good while, and welcome to the board, Mike. Also would like to introduce our new attorney, Lee Lott. And Lee, do you mind to introduce yourself?
Glad to. I'm Lee Lott. I've been an attorney for about a quarter century. I've been in private practice primarily. I spent a lot of my career in Mississippi, but my mom is from Nashville. My wife's from Nashville, and so we recently moved here, and it's like coming back home. So it's an honor to represent you and to work here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. And Lee and I have corresponded some since his appointment to this position. And one of the things that impressed me greatly about Lee is one of the earliest emails he sent me was asking about the members of the board in East Tennessee and if we were all okay from the results of Hurricane Helene. And Lee, that was very meaningful. Thank you for that kind act. And also today, I think most of the board members have met Assistant Commissioner Reed Witcher, and Reed is with us today. And Reed, welcome. Reed will have some information for us maybe in just a few minutes. Laura, we're welcome you today. Thank you for being with us. Laura is the Chief Counsel, Department of Commerce and Insurance, correct?
I am the chief counsel, so I have been over this board, and we are also really excited to have Lee join our legal team. And then Taylor, who has been filling in while we were sort of in between attorneys, is going to be here tomorrow, but was not able to make it today. But Lee will be your new attorney for all of your legal needs. So
Good.
we're really excited to have him on board.
Good. Thank you both. And then Karen, thank you so much. Karen has really helped me tremendously in preparing for today's meeting and tomorrow's meeting. And I've asked her 100 zillion questions, and she's been very patient with me throughout this process. So thank you very much, Karen.
It's my pleasure.
And Laura, we're glad to have you with us today too. You don't sit in on many of our board meetings, so we're very pleased to have you with us today. I think I've introduced most everyone in the room. And Duke, you're consistent. We're glad you're here. Thank you for your work with us.
Happy to be here.
So I talked a little bit about Wendy's resignation and her new position with NASBA, and most of you probably know, but her position is Executive Vice President of NASBA, and that's a really neat position. Certainly, essentially one step away from the CEO of NASBA, and so just a wonderful promotion. When Wendy called me, the purpose of the call was to tell me about the resignation, but she was somewhat hesitant, and I said, Wendy, I've known for several years that you would end up at NASBA, at least I felt you would, because when you go to the NASBA meetings, we would have breakouts with the regions, and ours was the Southeast region, but Wendy would end up taking over the meeting. Everybody would ask Wendy what she thought, and then all ears and eyes were on Wendy. So there was no doubt that she was going to be a leader in that organization at some point in the future. So we certainly wish her the very best. But as I said, at the time of Wendy's resignation, I was actually headed out of the country, and Assistant Commissioner Reed Witcher and I we corresponded a fair amount, and he asked me to serve on a task force, or gave me the opportunity to serve. And when I told him about my travel schedule, he also gave me the opportunity to appoint someone from this board to serve. And immediately my mind went to Brad Floyd. Brad, maybe all of you know, was very instrumental in hiring Wendy 9 years ago. So Brad had been through this process once before, and certainly Brad knows Reed, and Brad also knows Deputy Commissioner Toby Compton. You've known Toby for a number of years, and Toby was involved in the process. So it just made sense to me to ask Brad to serve in this capacity, and he's done a superb job. Reed has commented a couple times to me about the significant role that Brad has played. So That timing really worked out perfect for me to get out of the way and for Brad to step in the process. But we have checked, I checked with Reed personally, and then Reed checked with council. And so you heard me mention earlier that we'll have reports from 3 of our 4 committees, but also a report from a task force. And that task force is the one that Brad was on, served on. So he and both he and Commissioner Witcher will have some comments for us. So Brad, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was a real pleasure to represent the Board of Accountancy on this task force searching for someone to fill the very, very big shoes that Wendy left behind. The search wasn't new to me. As Greg mentioned, 9 years ago, I was a member of that search committee that identified Wendy Garvin, and she has performed exemplary and exceeded expectations in many ways. However, we were looking for someone who would continue her legacy. In speaking with the HR folks at the state of Tennessee, they were extremely complimentary of the staff at the Board of Accountancy. The lack of turnover had a lot to do with it, but the efficiency, the competency, the consistency, and the teamwork was just remarkable, and they hold it up as a model of success, and we were just looking to continue that. I think you've all received the email from Assistant Commissioner Witcher about the search process. There were some 30-odd applications after the position was promoted in a number of ways, in addition to the state's process of exposing it to Tennesseans. It was exposed by the Tennessee Society of CPAs. I know the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, and Reed may know of others, but it was widely circulated for nearly 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. 30 applications came in, and I'm thankful to the department for doing a lot of the initial lead groundwork and whittling down that list of potential candidates to a group that were interviewed virtually initially, and the applicants were again defined to 3 or 4 of the top candidates, and I came into the process last week. I think it was Thursday. Participated with Assistant Commissioner Witcher, along with Deputy Commissioner Compton, someone with the HR group, and another regulatory board director. But I guess that was 4 of us, spent the better part of the day, the afternoon at least, interviewing the finalists. And each candidate received more or less an hour to present and answer questions. At the end of the day, without getting into any of the details, Greg mentioned that you will tomorrow meet and greet at 8 o'clock our recommended candidate, that this is all pending board approval, but we're extremely excited. And I think we have identified a candidate who will be well suited. I think you've all got the resume and seen the background, but the individual seems to have the skill sets that we were looking for, and I feel like we're in a very, very good position. Reed, without digging any deeper into our process, I'd like for you to explain what all happened and how it will transpire.
There we go. I don't use these microphones as often as you all do. I appreciate the overview that Brad gave. Without taking too much more of your time, I do want to say a few thank yous in this process. First to Brad for giving up a considerable amount of time to review resumes for a larger group, and then ultimately meeting with our finalists last week. Appreciate his background. And Brad has hired a lot of folks who are impactful to the accountancy field in Tennessee, so glad to have him as a part of the group. And also to Chairman Gilbert for your insight and approval along the way. We, the department, really value the partnership that we have with our boards, particularly the Board of Accountancy is one of 4 boards where we select candidates in tandem in this kind of unusual practice where we're selecting a candidate who ultimately has two bosses and is approved by two groups and is very much a state employee, but also very much someone who reports to this board. So that to say, appreciate the partnership that we have with this board. And then lastly, want to especially thank Karen Condon and the rest of the accountancy team. Karen has made this process very smooth for us as a division. I think you all know that Karen brings a tremendous wealth of knowledge. Tomorrow is not the first board meeting that Karen will be leading. Karen is highly capable and has been thrown to the wolves before. We've at least given her a little bit of advance notice this time that she was going to be leading a meeting. So all that to say, thank you to everyone who's been involved with the process. Last week I did share Jen Binkley's resume with each of you. Jen is, again, one of several highly qualified candidates that we had apply for the job. She has an interesting background coming from PwC and also work as a sole proprietor. She's going to relate to a lot of our licensees, and we're excited about that. So with that, I don't have a whole lot more to add about the process. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Jen will also be available tomorrow to answer any questions the board has.
Okay. I want to make sure that I get this across. I hope I did earlier, but Reed, thank you so much for your cooperation and working with me, with Brad, and as representatives of the Board of Accountancy. You have been an extremely valuable resource to us and cooperated to the fullest, and so thank you so very much for doing that. So, we are glad to have you as part of the department. So. Okay. Anything else, Reed, that we need? Okay. So, and Brad, thank you very much. I know that's been a real commitment on your part, but you did such a great job hiring Wendy 9 years ago. It just made sense for you to be participating in this process. So thank you so much for doing that. At this point, I will turn the meeting over to Chairman Pam Church, Chair of the Licensing Committee. But before I do that, Pam, I would like to thank you. Pam serves as secretary of the board, and that is quite a time commitment. But Pam also graciously agreed to chair the licensing committee. So double duty. Thank you so much, Pam.
Glad to do it. Is this on
No.
now? All right. We have 3 issues to consider. Did I do that noise? The screen. Okay. So the 3 documents you'll be looking at are extension request Javon Mead, extension request Molly Barclay, and then Hurricane Helene CPE extensions. So let's start with Javon Mead. Let me remind you, and go over this for everybody. When people ask for extensions on keeping parts that have been passed, we generally look for at least 2 things. One is there an extenuating circumstance that would warrant such an extension? So in the past, we've had illness of the person or family members, or, there are just a number of things. And number 2, documentation, sometimes medical reports, dated documents, et cetera. So it runs a gamut. I mean, just so many different things. But I thought I would mention those 2 because they are relevant, I feel like, in these. I also remind you that we had a blanket extension that extended any credits that expired from January 30th, 2020 through May 11th, 2023. Those were extended to June 30th, 2025. Did I get those dates correct, Karen, I think? And so we're also operating within that environment, and those were due to all the COVID disruptions, et cetera. And of course, CPA exam has gone through changes, et cetera. So this is the environment in which we're operating. So the first request, Javon Mead, his BEC score expired May 23rd, 2023, and that seems like a long time ago, but remember that the blanket extension extended anyone whose score expired through May 11th, 2023, and his expired May 23rd, 2023. So about what, very short time thereafter. And so he is requesting an extension due to the illness and then subsequent death of a parent, and he has provided documentation on that. He has provided the obituary of his late mother and his scores on the exams. So my recommendation would be to grant this extension, but I will open it for discussion by committee members or the whole board. Comments?
Madam Chairman, I'm also supportive of that extension in this case.
Okay.
I'm supportive as well.
All right. Well, Karen, can I go ahead and make a motion there that, now do we don't need a voice vote, do we?
We don't need to have a roll call.
A roll call,
vote.
that's what I mean.
No, we don't.
Okay. So I would move that we grant Javon Mead this extension for BEC, and I would recommend that it go to I'll get my wits together. June 30th, 2025.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The second one is Molly Barclay. Her reg score expired 9/21/23, and just as a reminder, the blanket extension was for scores that expired through May 11th, 2023. She's requesting an extension for reg to June 30th, 2025 for reg due to having cared for an ailing parent and also her own treatment for anxiety, and she has provided documentation. I would recommend approving this as well, but open it up for discussion.
I'm also supportive and would second the recommendation to approve.
I also think it's reasonable.
And certainly, we take mental health issues and physical health issues both very seriously. So I do make that move that we approve Molly Barclay's request to extend reg to June 30th, 2025. And Kevin, I think you said you would second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the third one's a little different. Unfortunately, we have an extenuating circumstance that just affected thousands and thousands and is ongoing. And let me say before we get to this that on behalf of the board that we are certainly thinking about the people who are still very much affected by the hurricanes and are dealing with the aftermath. So this is not for keeping parts. This is for CPE. And so this document says, why is this on the agenda? In light of the destruction in the wake of Hurricane Helene, we anticipate requests for CPE extensions from those CPAs in affected areas. The board has the authority to grant extensions of up to 6 months, allowing the CPA to timely renew and complete the CPE requirements after the end of the year, 12/31/24, without penalty. Rule 0020-05-.07 requires the CPA to make this request in writing before the license expires. And then as far as 0020-05-07, that rule is given there. And again, it says that the board can extend up to 6 months and that the license holder has to make the request. And generally, we would require documentation. So for routine matters, the staff of the Board of Accountancy consider these and make extensions if it's not some special case. Sometimes someone will need more than the 6 months, for instance, or anyway, there may be other circumstances. But we've been asked to decide a maximum for this situation within which they can operate on that basis of considering cases. And we've been asked to set the maximum time. 6 months, I'm thinking, is sort of long, maybe 2 months. That's just an idea, but I throw it out to you. And also, what documentation would you want to see? Is it just they live in the state, the area, in South Tennessee, the area that is affected? Or what would you like to see?
Madam Chairman, I understand that those affected CPAs in the counties that have been declared as a part of that natural disaster area are tremendously impacted. And it would be my recommendation that we automatically extend those for those CPAs that reside in those affected counties. I don't know how many there are, maybe 6 or 7 in East Tennessee, an automatic blanket extension for all of them for 6 months. That'll get them through the tax season into, June. And they've just been devastated over there.
And that's a good point, that it is tax season and audit season.
This would
right?
take them from December 31 or till June, right? It just seems reasonable to me, but that's my suggestion.
And just their place of residence, if it's in one of the counties, according to the weather service as to what was affected.
That's kind of what I was thinking, but I'd be interested in hearing what others say.
I think the IRS has identified and already provided relief to folks in specified counties. I don't have a list of those counties now, but they're certainly in Upper East Tennessee. Do you have information?
I do actually have that list because it's not working here. There we go. I do have the list because as I was prepping for this, I was thinking, why don't we consider looking at the county's IRS is designated, or FEMA, or whoever, and apply it to those with the blanket extension, and that way the staff doesn't. And I guess as part of that, can we waive any requirement for a written request from the license holder for the getting a CPA, and then also that documentation that they live there? I guess we know where they reside, what county, correct? So, but there are, I think, 8 counties that have been identified by the IRS.
Can we just clarify so we're all in agreement what those counties are? So the list that I have is Carter County, Cott County, Greene County, Hamblin, Hawkins, Johnson, Unicoi, and Washington. I just want to make sure, since that was not in the executive order, that we're all in agreement that that's the list.
Is that the IRS list?
That's the list from the news.
Those are the ones that I found just
Those are-
researching to the
okay.
IRS, yeah.
That's what I've seen too.
Okay. I can
Which
look and
isn't
see
to
if the
say
IR
that
I can-
someone else could request an extension, but I hate for people not to know about it. And
No,
not
that's
to
fine. I
get
just
it,
wanted to be
so.
really clear on our record.
I like that.
That we were all in agreement on the counties. And then the other question I wanted to ask, if you're considering people that don't live in the county, but maybe their practice is in that county, would you like them to be included? These are the two questions I wanted to put out there.
Well, that was what I was going to raise, was the fact that you've got people in Sullivan County that drive to Washington County that are in the infected area. They may not personally have their life turned up, but where they're working may be totally destroyed. So we definitely consider them if they're on that list and they show that they were working in that county, that they should be included. Because a lot of people commute from Unicoi to Sullivan County, they would not be included. And obviously, Sullivan County people commute to Unicoi because they like to live over in Sullivan County, the lakeside, and not on the riverside. And so I would definitely include them.
And just to clarify, that list I read, I just cross-referenced, that is the IRS list as well.
I would totally agree with that recommendation. Now, what about the documentation? Kevin said, can we waive that? Karen, you and I had talked briefly about that. Is that, and I'd asked our legal folks, is that a problem given the rule that we're using for this?
What are they trying to waive? From the board?
I'm not sure what kind of documentation we would be asking for, just simply living and working in those counties, now that we know a list of the counties affected.
Does that sound feasible for the office to deal with, just picking out those? That's the only thing I
Yes.
thought about documentation was it would give you a list to go by. But
Yes, I think so.
you can
Provided the
screen, I
CPAs
guess.
have kept their addresses up to date as they should have, we should be able to run a list of employment and home addresses.
Okay.
By county. I wasn't sure about the written request part of it is the only reason I didn't suggest a blanket extension, because the rule specifies a written request from the CPA.
This is a question for Laura and Lee, but, so I'm looking at the rule in the agenda. I would prefer that we not require a written request, but the rule states that the board may, upon written request, extend the time up to 6 months, within which licensee holders must comply, reasons of poor health, so forth, or other good cause. I think this would fall under other good cause, but I'm not sure about it does state upon written request, and so I don't know if we can modify that or not. Hopefully we can, but
is there an easy online place where they could simply enter their intention to file late?
I think we could likely develop a form stack and advertise it on our website to let people do that. They would still be able to renew the license on time, which is why the extension is granted, so there's no penalty, there's no late fee, the license doesn't, change to that grace period designation. So they would still be able to renew the license on time. We just wouldn't expect the CPE to be completed until June 30, if that's the date that if they were to be audited, selected for the audit, we would, looking at our list of those in the affected areas, we would know that their CPE was not due on 12/31, it was instead due on 6/30. It's going to affect our audit, quite a bit, because we do that in May.
So when they file to renew the license, is there just a place there where they could just say, extended?
Just thinking off the cuff, since the renewal applications haven't been created yet, they haven't been, out, they haven't gone live, we might be able to change some of the language. So in lieu of the CPE documentation, attach, a statement regarding you're in the affected area or something like that. We'll have to work on the mechanics of it.
I also
Sure
like
we'll
the
get that
idea of
done.
making it very clear to everyone that we are doing this, so that would cover that as well.
One of the options that we could do is like we call it a notify, which I think is mostly colloquial at this point, but I'm sure you all have gotten it before. Hopefully you're all signed up for the notifies about the accountancy board. So we usually only use it like for rulemaking or legislation, but we could also send out a notify asking people to respond to us in email, which would count in writing. If you are working or living in one of these affected counties and you intend to renew late, let us know. That was what Reed. So, I mean, there are options to make sure people are aware that they have that flexibility if they need to use it.
Okay.
Seems like the most efficient way would just be to have a checkbox in the renewal process that has the applicant confirm that they live in one of the affected areas and that they are requesting a 6-month, live or work in the affected area and are requesting a 6-month
like
to be included in the 6-month waiver
Yes, I
that's
like
being
that.
advertised, maybe on the main site. And that way you get the written request that Greg was referring to, and you also get the applicants opting in
Right.
to
I like
to
that.
the
I like
waiver.
that. And it's easy.
Yep. And that way it's all automated as well, and we'll be able to run a check against the home or work address.
Any other discussion?
Just to clarify, are we only extending meeting a CPE requirement for the renewal? They would still renew and pay their fee?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so they
It
just get 6
changes-
extra months to do the CPE compliance part?
Right, it changes the CPE due date, not the renewal due date.
Well, then I would think Sam just pegged it with the check the box and positive, since they're going to renew anyway. And then that way it's done. And then they've got 6 additional months to get their CPE documentation in. So,
Yeah, because there could be some applicants who were able to meet their requirement and don't need the waiver, and so they would just not check the box and opt in to the waiver request.
the only caution I would have would be that in the process after they've already renewed, would they have the ability to go back in to add it to their online? Would they have access to that? Or should they, if the system doesn't allow that past a certain time, then, especially after it's already been renewed, there definitely needs to be consideration about how they get that documentation into the state before that date.
I have a question just for clarity. We've used the word documentation a couple of times. We're really talking about completing the required CPE, right?
What we say on the documentation is you have to actually report, the courses you went to prove your CPE. So it's that documentation that you attach to the renewal of your license and submit that says you did complete your CPE, because when we weren't requiring that, we had a lot of people just checking a box saying they did their CPE and they didn't, believe it or not. And so our audit requirements are going way down in the process. And so we want to keep that there, but they just make sure that they can report it.
Yeah, that was my point of clarification. Are we giving them an extra 6 months because they're in these 6 counties to actually do the courses online or whatever? So it's not just the documentation, it's to complete the CPE. That would also only be even-numbered licensees, because that's the only ones who are due this December. Okay, so it'd be part of the renewal process. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
That's right, in the documentation, a lot of the discussion was we have to have documentation to request an extension. So that's different from the documentation to validate your CPE. Would someone like to draft a motion? Oh, wait, Karen's got her mouth open.
I believe that Rita and I were discussing, that if the board does want to do a blanket extension and allow these folks to renew on 12/31 but have their CPE due on 6/30, then I think it would simply be a matter of a motion to allow us to come up with the process to
Okay,
do that.
that sounds good to me. That sounds good to me, and
Sorry,
then you can deal with
I have a question, sorry, that
extensions.
Mike hit a point that I think bears just fleshing out a bit. If the requirement is to complete the required courses by 6:30, if someone takes a course and completes it on 6:30, they will not have the documentation likely the same day, or they may not. So if somebody takes a course and completes it on 6:30, is there a period of time beyond that with which we would say they can submit the documentation and be in compliance with this rule?
How do you usually do that?
Well, during an audit, for example, the certificate will have the course completion date rather than the date that the certificate for it was issued. So I don't think that we would expect people to have everything to us on 6:30. But that's just something
We
we'll
would
have to work out.
expect the courses to be completed by
Exactly, yeah.
6:30.
Because I know it does take time to get, some sponsors are quicker than others to get the documentation to you.
That sounds good.
May I make, I'm not on this committee, but may I make a point? Of course, we all get audited, so we upload our documentation. Do we have to actually upload the documentation when we renew? I know we have to give a list. Okay, so they can renew and just give a list. Clearly, they'll be short.
Yeah.
And then they'll check the box, and then they got 6 months to either renew it and get documentation. Okay, so okay. I just want to make that point. So when they do renew in the fall, they're not going to have to upload all these documents anyway, right? Unless they got audited. Okay, thank you. And I guess the last point, Andy, you can tell me, we're probably not talking about a whole lot of people. Those are not highly populated counties, right? I mean, they're not highly populated with CPAs, I wouldn't think. So I wouldn't think this would be a big deal in terms of numbers of people, so.
You would be surprised.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
well,
There could be a lot of people affected, but hopefully not, but there
Yeah.
could be.
thank you.
The only thing I would say is, right now, we have a system where it says you have to renew your license by 12/31, but we give a grace period after that time. You know, usually if you, in the last 15 to 30 days, as long as you register, I don't know, I once heard 15 days. How many days do we actually give a grace period to go in there and actually upload the document?
Well, though the license does expire on 12/31, you can renew through the end of January without any additional fees. You can renew through the end of June with a late fee.
So why don't we consider, as a thought, putting down that, you have until June 30th, but to get your CPE, and then you have until July 31st to actually upload the courses you took and the credits you earned by course, instead of using the word documentation, because that's what the document that we had to upload was just more or less a listing of our courses. What do you think about that? So that would be consistent with, they renew before 12/31, and then once they finish that last course on 6/30, then they would have 30 days then to get that loaded up into the system, or to email it, or to however way we do it. But that would be their process then, but give them that at least up until that date to send it to the state.
Andy, the only concern I might have with that is just the rule language, which talks about allowing an extension of time of up to 6 months. And so I don't know if we basically are now talking July 31 instead of June 30, if that gets us beyond that 6-month timeframe that we have at least the authority under the rule to grant an exception for.
Is that grace period anywhere in the rules, or is that just the practice of the board?
It's in the rules,
The grace period is?
yes.
Okay.
So does it
Well, maybe
state
the
that?
same one would apply then.
Well, if it says that you have up to 6 months to obtain the education, they would still be obtained during that period. It would just be, I'm not sure the rule actually talks about reporting that you actually got it during that 6-month period, in the 6-month period. Would it? Do you have access to that rule? You could read it to us, or?
The background information that we have says complete the CPE requirements after the 12/31/2024 deadline. So I would interpret that just to mean have it completed by then, and you may get your documentation 2 or 3 days later, but.
If you'd like, I can read the rule.
Yep.
The board may, upon written request, extend the time up to 6 months within which license holders must comply with the requirements of this chapter for reasons of poor health, military service, foreign residence, or other good cause. And just for the record, that's Rule 20-05-.07, extension of time.
What about the rule for, just a normal rule for 1231? How does that read? Is the grace period in there? That's what I want to know, or how is it in there?
When you say grace period, are you referring to the extra number of days
Not-
that's needed to send in the paperwork? Is that what you mean? I don't know. I can't answer that, but maybe.
I think the only reference I can find to the 30 days is in the fee structure, that after 30 days, then a late fee will be assessed. And then after 6 months, a license not renewed within 6 months is considered to be expired.
So would those clauses still hold for these people, but they just got an exception for?
Yes, I think that would be
CPE.
fine because they will still be renewing
I think
on
so too.
time.
Mhm.
And it's just that we won't expect to see CPE dated 12/31 or before. It's not unusual to have requests for extensions. We have them every year. We have several every year. And we simply, assign them a due date, go ahead and renew. This is your due date for completing the CPE. And when it comes to the documentation, I think that's something that we'll just have to figure out, basically.
So we are considering a motion that says, and I'll just start it and we can edit, that the board grants an extension for anyone who resides in or works in the counties affected by Hurricane Helene. The extension would be 6 months to complete the CPE. What else do we need?
Madam Chairman, I'd just go ahead and specifically reference those counties that were earlier listed, so there's no ambiguity in the resolution.
Yes, that's good too. And do we need to specify 6/30/2025 or just 6 months?
I think 6 months would do.
Do we need to add something?
Do you want me to read the county?
Do we need to add something that basically allows the staff to figure this out in terms of the process to the motion?
Yeah, you should delegate to the staff, delegate to Karen and staff to come up with the process to put this forward.
Okay.
Did you want me to read the counties in again? Is that what you were
The
asking
what?
me? Did you want me to read the counties in again? Is that what you were asking me to do?
That would be good. Karen, are you taking this down? Or who's taking this down?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if that's what you were asking me or not.
I can read them in.
Okay.
If you want me to. It'll be Carter, Cock, Green, Hamlin, Hawkins, Johnson, Unicoi, and Washington.
All right, can you read that back to me?
Okay, it'll be Carter.
No, I meant her,
Oh,
the whole
okay.
motion.
Going from my notes, that a motion for the board to grant an extension to anyone who works or resides in the affected counties, according to the list that we have read, that were affected by Hurricane Helene, allowing 6 months to complete CPE requirements for renewal, and delegating to staff the responsibility to develop a process to accomplish this.
Is that good?
I think you might want to say an extension of 6 months, right? I think you just read 6 months, but it's a 6-month extension, is that correct?
No, absolutely. In my brain, that was there. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it. I should have brought something to make notes on. All right, so I move what Karen just read. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
May I make one last comment now that you voted on that committee? I would say make sure, along the lines of what Sam was saying about check the box, let's make sure that, isn't there some certification? I know there's some certification that it says all of this, I've done all the CPE and everything's true and correct. Let's just make sure there's no conflicting language, that someone doesn't sign off that says I've done 80 hours, and that needs to be altered in some manner if you check that box. And then you're not certifying that I've done 80 when you haven't done 80. Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
There's 5 statements that you have to make an affirmative response to when renewing your license regarding your CPE. So I don't know if there's going to be an adjustment within that language.
Right.
Or if there's negative responses, does that preclude the license from being renewed?
Right, that's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you.
A negative response to any of those questions will cause it to go to us for review rather than approving automatically.
That concludes our part of the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Church. Just a clarification primarily for our new board members. These same topics will come up tomorrow on the agenda. So the motions that were made and approved for today are to submit these to the board for its consideration tomorrow. Hopefully we were efficient today, though, and so that will be a very smooth process tomorrow. Secondly, I would like to mention that the folks in those areas really have suffered some devastation. And so I personally thank you for extending that time, because I think those folks, some of them are in real need. I have a daughter who lives in Swannanoa, North Carolina, just 10 to 15 minutes from downtown Asheville, and their whole area is just devastated. I was able to go over about a week ago and take some supplies, and the roads are out. They still don't have running water, and probably won't for a period of time, because the water lines run under the pavement, under the roads, and the roads are just caved in to the river, the Swannanoa River, and so there's no piping for running water. So that's really, really a difficult situation in Swannanoa. But similar situations exist in Tennessee also, so thank you for your consideration on that. At this point, I would like to turn the meeting over to Chairman of the Enforcement Committee and former Board Chair Kevin Monroe.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the members who are serving on the newly constituted Enforcement Committee, and Mike, welcome to this committee. And so what we traditionally do in our committee is go over the cases that we will be acting on in a fair amount of detail. And we basically divide the cases into buckets. And so the first bucket in this particular case is 9 cases that will be on what we call the consent agenda. And what that really means is that there's not any proposed discipline in terms of civil penalties or fines. The case may be recommended for closure. It may just be recommended for proceeding with just a letter of warning. And so we'll go through those cases. Then the next bucket would be, and that's the last 4 cases, would be those for which discipline is proposed. And so typically when that occurs, if the board agrees, what we're really doing is directing the staff and legal counsel to follow through on the recommendations, which are to agree to settle, provided that the respondent pays the civil penalty and does the appropriate paperwork. The respondent has the option not to agree with that and to proceed and request effectively what would be an administrative hearing before the board and an administrative law judge, in which case there would be further adjudication. And so what we will be deciding in our cases for those that are their proposed discipline really is directing the staff to proceed within the parameters that we agree to try to settle those cases based on the disciplinary matrix that we have. There is a third bucket that we don't have any representative examples of in today's agenda, which would be representations. And typically, those are cases where there has been something new brought to light, or perhaps something was placed in litigation monitoring that has resolved itself. We were waiting for PCOB or other regulatory action that's now occurred, and then we will retake up the case and decide the appropriate adjudication for it. In the committee, basically, only committee members vote today in the session that we'll have on the recommendation, which will go to the full board tomorrow. However, by tradition, we always allow all board members, whether they sit on the committee or this committee or not, to participate in the discussions and to ask any questions that they want. So we'll just proceed through the cases here. So we've got our first 9 cases are on the consent agenda where no recommended discipline is at least set before us. The first case, item 1, deals with attest work and lack of peer review. As you see in the write-up, effectively, there was an internal complaint open because we received notification that the respondent had been dropped from peer review. However, as it turned out, that respondent was not providing any attest services that would require peer review during the time that he was not properly enrolled in peer review. So the recommendation on this case is to close it because there was no real fundamental violation that occurred. What we traditionally do with the consent item agendas is we'll summarize each of the 9 cases and then vote on them en masse unless someone needs the case to be pulled out, and then we'll vote on that separately. So I'll just review all of the consent item cases and then we'll have a vote on them as a group. The second case here involves a situation where there was an allegation that the respondent had committed a felony. However, under our board rules, we can discipline upon conviction of a felony or any crime and an element of which is dishonesty or fraud under the laws of the United States, the state, or any other state or country, if they would have constituted a crime. In this particular case, the person has been alleged to have committed a felony, but there is no conviction of that felony. So it's premature to enact discipline on this particular matter. And so the recommendation is to close this particular complaint. The third item relates to an allegation of basically due care and a billing dispute. And in this particular case, there were 2 violations relating to due care. This involves an HOA situation. And the respondent did respond to the complaint and provided documentation that responded directly to the complainant's allegations in that matter. And then secondly, there was effectively a billing dispute as a second part of that particular complaint. And the board does not have jurisdiction over billing disputes. So in a nutshell, it was viewed that the respondent had responded appropriately and addressed the matters laid out in the complaint relative to due care, and we don't deal with billing disputes as a matter of jurisdiction, and so the recommendation is to close this complaint. The fourth item is relating to an allegation for unlicensed activity or use of the word accounting. In this particular case, as it happened, the accounting designation was in a broad-based business description, almost like in old-fashioned yellow pages where the header would be, accounting, consultation, taxes, and the individual respondent was in no way asserting in the public marketplace that he was an accountant or a CPA. And so it was determined that there's no evidence that the respondent had violated the rule, and the recommendation is to close this particular complaint. The fifth item is a complaint relative to due care. And in this particular case, upon investigation, it was clear that the respondent is not a licensed CPA, nor had they held out as a CPA, and therefore there's not a basis for disciplining the respondent under our jurisdiction, and the case is recommended for closure. The next item has actually 2 separate complaints filed by different complainants. With respect to the first complaint, This involved some lawsuit, and the complaint alleged that the respondent had refused to return copies of the complainant's tax returns and also wrongfully disclosed them to a third party. Upon investigation, it appears that the respondent did disclose information to the CPA's attorney, who owes a corresponding duty of confidentiality. And the view here is that that did not constitute a violation of the board's rules with respect to due care in that particular matter. The second element of the complaint, or separate complaint with respect to this, effectively boils down to a fee dispute. And again, for fee disputes, we do not take jurisdiction in those matters. And so the recommendation in this particular case is to close both of those complaints. Item number 7 is relating to client records and the return of them. The allegation was that the respondent was hired to do the taxes for the complainant and a sibling, and also an allegation that a signature was forged. The respondent provided a detailed response and indicated and provided documentation of email correspondence to the complainant and the complainant's advisory team that included copies of the tax returns and documents. And the respondent also explained that the siblings were co-trustees of a revocable trust and that only one sibling signed the tax returns as co-trustee, noting that the IRS does not require both co-trustee signatures. The complainant was attempted to be contacted for more information. They would not provide additional information, and so the recommendation here is to close this particular complaint. Item 8 relates to the use of accounting and advertising in a Tennessee location. In this particular case, the respondent indicated that a third party was hired to create a website for the consulting business. The website did have language that would include inappropriate language. And when informed about the violation or alleged violation, the respondent was immediately cooperative and removed the term accounting from all relevant areas. Therefore, council recommends closing this complaint with a letter of warning. And the last consent agenda item case, again, relates to unlicensed activity and use of the term accounting or misuse of the term accounting by the respondent. The respondent's counsel responded and indicated that they were unaware of the restriction and have since removed the term from all social media pages linked to the respondent. It was determined that the accounting term had been scrubbed from the items, and therefore, because they quickly remedied the issue when it was brought to their attention and expressed remorse, the recommendation is to close the complaint with a letter of warning. So those are the 9 elements or cases in our consent agenda. If there are any questions or further information of either me or of council on any of those from either committee members or any board members, feel free, and then I would, following that question and answer period, we will recommend a motion to approve the recommendations for each of these 9 cases. Any questions or comments on these? If not, I would make a recommendation that the committee accepts the recommended outcome or closure or recommendations for each of the 9 cases in the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And again, only committee members vote for a recommendation to the board here. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, that motion passes. We'll now proceed to the 4 cases in the proposed discipline category. And in these cases, there is actual discipline that is being proposed or recommended that we will have to deal with. The first case is also relating to the use of the accounting term or advertising in a Tennessee location. Although the complaint was filed anonymously, they allege respondent is advertising as a CPA firm while not properly licensed. The respondent's attorney responded and advised that the respondent does not hold themselves out as a licensed CPA or provide any attest services. They expressed a willingness to modify their website at the board's request. As it turned out, some elements of the references to accounting were removed, but other references remained. And it's also not known whether they ultimately removed the phraseology relating to accounting on the firm building signage. Although there's no prior history here, the recommendation is for authorizing a formal hearing with the authority to settle via a consent order requiring respondent to remove accounting from all relevant locations within 60 days of signing the consent order. In the event that the respondent does not comply within the aforementioned timeframe, council recommends authorizing a $1,000 civil penalty. For these, typically, we would also vote on these as a group, but again, if there are any questions as we go along, feel free to ask, and then we or council will try to respond to those. The next item, item number 11, relates to unlicensed attest work and lack of peer review. In this particular case, the complaint was opened by a city auditor after the respondent prepared an audit report for a local athletic association. The complaint indicates that the respondent was not a licensed CPA, does not hold a firm permit, and is not enrolled in peer review as required to prepare an audit report. Upon investigation, the respondent indicated that he didn't think it was required because the relevant report would not be used in, quote, an official capacity, end quote. In the report at issue here, the respondent used the identifier independent auditor and accountant. The respondent doesn't hold an accounting degree, has never been licensed, and relies on working experience at a CPA sole proprietor practice in Texas over 10 years ago for that person's basis to be able to conduct the audit. During the investigation, counsel notes that the factor to consider here indicates that the respondent did not show any remorse and relied on representations made by the president of the Youth Association rather than independently determining the requirements for the audit. So the recommendation is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order, assessing a civil penalty in the amount of $3,500 based on the audit report being issued without respondent holding a firm permit or being registered in peer review. The next item is also a case of attest work and lack of peer review. In this particular case, there's also history of prior complaints and civil penalties. In this particular case, the board was notified that the respondent had been dropped from peer review, and this complaint was therefore opened internally. The respondent initially failed to answer the complaint, and an investigation revealed that the respondent's last peer review report was dated in July 16 of 2014. Further, the respondent executed an exemption attestation declaring that the respondent's last performed a test service was on December 31, 2022. So subsequent to the 2014 last peer review and well beyond the peer review boundary date. The respondent has a history of discipline with the board. Previously, they entered into a consent agreement and agreed to pay a fine of $1,000 for failure to exercise due care. They also, in 2017, entered into a consent order and agreed to pay a fine of $3,000 for providing attest services, even though respondent knew it was removed from the peer review program. So in this particular case, the recommendation is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via a consent order, assessing a civil penalty of $4,000 based on violations of the appropriate Tennessee regs for performing attest services. I think it says in our write-up 2002, but it should be 2022, and for failing to reply to investigation reports.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yes.
ask a question about this case, the information presented? At the beginning, under history, it says the prior complaint was in 2010, but then in the next page, second paragraph, before the recommendation, it says in 2008. respondent entered into a consent agreement, so I'm not sure which one is correct.
That's a good clarification or question here. So we'll turn to council to, if you have that answer now, great, but if not, we'll work it in tomorrow when we actually deal with the case as a board.
I don't have it now, I'll get it.
All right, very well.
Yep.
Thank you, John. Is a case relating to unlicensed activity. In this particular case, it stems from the Board of Contractors referring a complaint to the Board of Accountancy. And here we have a review report that was issued by the respondent who is unlicensed. They signed the review report in April of 2024 and included the designation CPA. They did previously hold a CPA license, but it expired in 2013. Moreover, the firm identified on the respondent's review report does not have a firm permit and is not enrolled in peer review. The assigned investigator made multiple attempts to interview the respondent and confirmed the respondent's telephone number with the respondent's client, but the respondent never replied. The investigator did interview the client, who provided an affidavit that confirmed that the respondent provided the review report without a license. There was also some additional information as a result of that investigation that indicated that as an aggravating factor, essentially the respondent performed unlicensed attest services knowingly and repeatedly, and the respondent failed to answer multiple requests for a response in this case. So the recommendation here is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle a consent via a consent order, assessing a civil penalty of $5,000 based on violations of the Tennessee Code, requiring a license, requiring a firm permit, and prohibiting accounting delegation, and also requiring peer review. So those are the 4 items in the proposed discipline bucket of cases, and I would offer up a motion that we approve the recommended discipline subject to the finalization of the date fact issue in the case that John questioned, and so we'll have that tomorrow. Is there a second? And then we'll open it up for discussion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from committee or board members on any of these cases? If not, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that motion carries. And one of the items that we should put on our to-do list to provide to particularly our new board members, over the years, the board has worked up what we call a disciplinary matrix, which kind of provides the general lanes, if you will, for the proposed amounts of civil penalties for various types of violations. There's a general lane, there's a lane when we have mitigating factors, and a lane when we have aggravating factors, and kind of ranges there. I think that would be helpful to make sure that we have provided to probably all of the board members, just as a refresher, but particularly to our new board members so that they have that as a reference point. The board developed that probably, I'd say, it was really under Gabe Roberts 6 or 7 years ago, and we've tweaked it from time to time, but that's a helpful kind of guide for us because so many of our complaints often trod the same ground, particularly those with our contractors licensing board folks that like to do reviews without a firm permit or a license. That concludes the Enforcement Committee report. One other item I should have mentioned earlier, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. We do have as part of our report, the complaint report. This is the one-pager that lists the open cases. None of these cases are involved in the legal report for this particular meeting, but they may have been addressed by the board and placed in litigation monitoring, for example, in past meetings, or for several of these cases, they will be coming up in our February meeting legal report. So there's no action necessary on the board's part or the committee's part, but it does give you a sense of the open cases, and generally those that are open for long periods of time are generally those that have been placed in litigation monitoring, and they, in some cases, may take years for things to resolve and for things to move forward on. So that's just an informational item. think that concludes the Enforcement Committee report, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Monroe, thank you so very much. You certainly have a talent for summarizing those cases in a very efficient manner, and I'm very appreciative of your work on that, so thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and let me just kind of pass on that thanks directly to council and to staff who worked through the reports and the edits and so forth to prepare for this meeting, and that effort was greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like for this meeting to be as efficient as possible, but a matter popped up just a couple minutes before this meeting started, and I need to speak with council before we move to the next section of the agenda. So maybe if we could take a break, and it shouldn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes, but let's say 3:30 to be back by 3:30, and then I don't think we have a lot of content to cover after that, but I do need just a few minutes with council before we proceed. So thank you.
We'll be following that move. Both moves are slated in the spring.
My previous life was CEO of the Tennessee Society of Certified Public Accountants.
Okay.
For roughly 40 years.
Okay.
Fred Frick, who you may know as a history note, whereas managing for Pricewaterhouse at the time I started, and he was on the board of council of the initial national firm partner. He was a delightful guy. I don't think Fred's around anymore, but he had a history that firm, or at least Pricewaterhouse out of Cooper's stuff. The history of the national market is deep, I guess.
I don't know the history of the two legacy folks. Yeah. But,
When did that merger occur, what, about 20 years ago?
the merger was 98 or 99. Yeah.
I became CEO of TSCPA in '87 and did a lot of work with the coalition, the Cross Coalition.
Okay.
Met with the expansion partners, and it was a lot of fun. Got to know the national reps and travel, and it was a good work.
When did you retire from the state?
My last year was the lockdown COVID year, so March of '21, so it's been roughly 3 years.
So Kara was your successor?
Yeah, right. Kara was my CEO for 10 years, and she was promoted from within.
Okay.
Yeah, she participates in. And Wendy Gardner, who was our previous director, she was our manager of peer review for 10 years at the TSCPA office in Brentwood. Just a little background on her role, but she and Kara worked closely together, and it was interesting 9 years ago when I won the search committee.
she's got a great role now in Nazareth.
She does. She's executive VP, number 2 in the Storage Association.
Yeah.
This gives us some really good insight into what NASB's doing.
Yeah.
Have her there.
I didn't realize they were moved to Nashville, but NASBA is here.
Yeah.
Right, so
They were in Midtown Manhattan forever. And the previous CEO there, David Costello, I don't know if you know David, pretty active in the community. He was the executive director here at the time. NASBA had a national international search there next to you. Well, David had retired as executive at UNESCO. He had actually spun off.
same place? Yeah, well, no. So it was a sweet thing to do.
Okay.
That's good.
I guess they broadcast that.
We came, okay, that is.
Dozen times I've
Yeah,
been back to
yeah,
Memphis
they got a
and
great,
stayed at
Where is
Embassy
their office?
Suites there. Those cars
They're
are broken
down
all
on
the time.
Fourth Avenue.
Nothing. Ellington Place, they're Vanderbilt. About a dozen cars broken.
Okay. I'm glad that's not wrong with city together. It's everywhere.
Memphis gets a bad reputation.
It's everywhere.
Employees.
Yeah, I mean, it was just,
When I started in the late 80s,
just working small organizations, doing some construction. They couldn't get to the job, every truck got broken down. It feels hard for all these people. Just had a heart attack, I was at Vanderbilt getting treated. His car got broken. Yeah, his car got broken. Our regular
They
car
were
was
just having support, just counts, they just say, yeah, it just screws you up. It screws you up.
Yeah.
Among other
It was just.
A big deal. Yeah.
She had Dusty, she was the surgeon director in New York. They live over in Kansas Park, she's probably been with us for 10 years.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Yeah.
So he was over.
I used to live on Normandy, so yeah, I know.
So Jerry was over there.
So we spent a little tight around there. Yeah, it's kind of interesting international.
So maybe Wendy at some
Yeah.
point running the whole thing.
Yeah.
Potentially,
And so,
she's
I said,
probably early 50s, I don't know how much more time they have.
Well, that's good for her.
10 years, actually, she started with Florida Institute CPAs, moved to TSCPA for 10 years, and then a very important role for us.
Because he could get away.
Well, I tell you, the last year, I like it. There was always 50 people.
Well, yeah, Jay told him, don't do it, you know.
I started just at the University of Florida. We're one of those CPAs.
Chattanooga, it could be sketchy for sure, where we at now.
I'm the public member of the board.
Okay.
So we have 11 members. One is an attorney member who's next year.
Lock up doors is the day, just unheard of. You know, unheard of.
Takes me back when I was like 7 years old. you know.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah, it's,
we were in and out all the time, and going
Yeah,
on.
after I retired.
I know.
So did you ever consider getting your CPA license?
The place we moved to Chattanooga, we were told the prior residents didn't lock their door.
While not as elected, there's staff.
I don't know, his daughter,
He just don't put it.
Now for me, it's just second nature, you know, you know, like everything else.
oh man, alarms on, it's activated, you know. Yeah, but that's so, you know, so then I had to ask, like, okay, I've got to drive back to Chattanooga, it's what we're supposed to do. I gotta go to the interstate, you know. So what I did was I walked inside, and I just fussed up the manager. So you need tape or anything? So they had a couple of plastic bags, flat bags, so the black ones, you know, like lawn leaf bags. So I grabbed those,
So other than
and
this, are
duct
you
tape
doing
at the
anything?
hardware store, duct tape
Otherwise, what else you gonna do?
You could. I mean, I had to try it. It actually worked pretty well.
I was driving to Arkansas for years, so my wife and I spent, we were catching up with rural law. That's been very nice. Close to California.
Has unmuted now.
Okay, it's, I think it's 3:30, so we will resume our meeting. The next to the last item on the agenda, I may have said last previously, but the next to the last item is the Executive Committee, and there are three items, and I'm going to change the order of those just briefly for efficiency purposes. The first item that I want to mention is travel, and in your packet, your board package, you'll see that Duke had a couple of meetings during this reporting period, and looks great. Duke, thank you for being at these board meetings and participating in the department town hall meetings. So I don't know if the other executive committee members have any comments on that or not, but okay. And then secondly, let's go to the fiscal year 24 closing, and you have a financial report in your package, and the report indicates the expenditures for our fiscal year ended June 30 were $1,026,000, and our revenues were $1,012,000, and that's after deducting a state regulatory fee of $73,150. So our net is that we had a deficit of $13,958. It's fairly consistent with the prior year, of which we had a deficit of $7,556, but we have a substantial reserve balance even after that deficit of $1,587,243. So, comments?
Good job on budgeting.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Is there an issue with the deficit, two very, very small minor deficits in subsequent years? Is that an issue that we've got to address with the legislature, or I don't know what their role, but I've heard that when that happens, there may be some accountability. Kira, are you generally familiar with that?
I will say without a great deal of certainty that after 3 consecutive years,
Is it 3
I believe
consecutive
so,
years?
yes.
Okay.
I'll find out.
Well, the reserve should be taken into consideration, and I know historically this board has operated very efficiently with excess revenues that should be taken into consideration. I just wanted to make sure that that goes on the record, that they don't hold a very, very minor deficit.
Yeah, and in addition to that, part of the contributing factors to the deficit, one is a state regulatory fee of $73,150, which is money that goes directly to the state, and then state cost backs of $239,000. So a lot of the revenue is going back directly to the state in any event, but very minor deficit. Okay, any other comments on the financial report? The last item that I asked that we move to the bottom, or the last item on the executive list, deals with the state-specific ethics course outline. And this is what I actually needed to talk with council about for a few minutes. So most of you know that the Board of Accountancy contracts with the Tennessee Society of CPAs. The Tennessee Society of CPAs is the provider of our 2-hour state ethics course. And each year we review the outline for the course. Katie, if I get any of this wrong, feel free to step up and comment. Katie Cheek is the COO of the TSCPA. But we do contract with the TSCPA. And so the outline for 2025 calendar year is in your package. And I have reviewed that. Karen, of course, reviewed it, and probably some other members of staff. I think Wendy reviewed it actually before she left. And I also asked, I can't talk with former chairmen Monroe and Bonner without violating the sunshine rules, but I did ask Karen to contact them and ask them to review the outline. And my understanding from Karen is both of you gentlemen were fine with the outline. So it has gone through some review. But Perry Moore, who is a primary presenter of the course, has some comments, and I don't know what those comments are, but he is on the line. And so my question to council is, could he present his comments while we're in this executive committee session, or do we wait until the public comment period? And council advised that I could use my authority to ask him to speak to this matter during the executive session. And if board members object to that, then we can have a motion from someone on the board to allow us to have Perry present at this time. So I think it's a non-issue, but I would like, if you're okay with it, to have Perry make his comments at this time. And then Perry actually has some other comments on another matter, so we may roll right from this to the public comment period and allow Perry to ask questions or present information about another matter. So can we get Perry?
He is on the line. Dr. Moore, you may have to unmute your line.
I'm here.
Great.
I don't know that I had a comment about the outline. I've not seen it.
Oh,
I did
okay.
have a comment about something that you've already talked about today. Just didn't know best how to raise that issue.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So I thought you had a comment maybe about the state ethics outline.
I've not seen it yet.
Okay, so then I think the executive committee could go ahead and vote on that. Perry, if you'll just hang on, and then we'll move into the public comment section and ask you
Okay.
to offer your comments then.
All right, thank you.
So I would like a motion, I would like the executive committee to make a motion to approve the state ethics course outline for presentation to the full board tomorrow.
So moved.
So moved. Have a second? Second. Executive committee members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, we can move into the public comment period. And Dr. Moore, would you offer your comments, please?
I listened intently to the licensing committee report and request for extension for those impacted by Hurricane Helene. And I think all of that was focused on people who are renewing in 2024. There could be an impact for people who are renewing in 2025 next year, because all CPAs are still supposed to get 20 hours of CPE in each year. And if they were unable to do that before the flood, I'm not sure that might be likely that they could get the 20 hours by the end of the year. I don't know what impact that is, but certainly when they renew, you don't want them to be dinged for something that was out of their control. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm not the authority on this, but a thought that I have on it, and thank you, Dr. Moore, for mentioning that, is that those individuals could individually request extensions, or that we recognize an extension in their cases. Don't know how many of those there would be, or we can certainly modify the recommendation to the board tomorrow, or we can handle it at the board meeting tomorrow.
Just thinking out loud, that approval of extension wouldn't affect their application until they applied at the end of next year. However, we want them to know if we're going to grant that extension so that they are assured that they are in compliance if they do X, Y, Z. So I think I'd like to amend our motion. What do you think?
May I ask a question? Dr. Moore, is Rob Vance. Are you suggesting that there will be people who cannot receive their 20 hours, or that will not be able to complete any CPE in 2024? I think that's what you're saying. It's a possibility.
I don't know. That
Right.
could, if they were waiting until the last quarter to get their 20 hours, it could be an issue.
Right. So maybe we need to add that provision that if they don't comply with the 20-hour minimum, that that they would not be in violation. I think that's essentially what you're saying.
or they may need an extension to get their 20 hours into next year without penalty.
And the trouble is, Karen said that they're considering building it into the extension so that there's a question, do you reside in one of these counties? And then if yes, here's your extension, whatever. The problem is these people are not going to access that renewal website at the end of 2024 because they're not required to until 2025.
And that was the reason why I raised the point, because this wouldn't pop up officially until 2025.
Would it be sufficient for us to do a separate motion for those people, simply stating that they too would have a 6-month extension for getting the 20 required for 2024? But about all we could do would be to communicate it on our website or in the notification process previously mentioned.
We could use the notify on, there we go. We could use the notify system. We could put it in the newsletter, add it to the website. So I know there are a lot of CPAs who wait until the last minute to get their minimum hours for the year. And when we receive requests for an extension in a case like this, where someone says, someone's renewing at the end of 24 and they email and say, I had a really, bad time in 2023, I wasn't able to get my minimum hours. If it's for a good cause, we just say, just earn your 80 hours. There will be no penalty for not having met the year one minimum.
So is it better to go ahead and address that or to deal with it at the end of next year?
I think probably at the October meeting next year would probably work because, as Laura was pointing out, this exception or extension that we're granting doesn't exclude those people. They will still be able to ask for an extension should they need one, or if we feel like another blanket extension is needed for the 2025 renewal, we can do that as well.
This is also going to tie into what my comment earlier about what Duke was saying, the 5 affirmations that you have to make. There's one of them that says, I got 20 hours in each, a minimum of 20 in each year, so we're going to have to change that one too.
But that'll be next year.
Well, right, but it needs to be, I guess go ahead and change it now. Change the form now, right? If we're going to
Seems like
change
we
the
need a
form to begin with.
communication now, right? At least a communication now,
Right.
so that.
These people wouldn't be affirming those yet.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm saying, just go ahead and put it on the, if we're going to change the the application, we might as well go ahead and change it now.
Yeah.
In all those areas.
Yeah, it seems like you'd need a communication now so that people who are renewing in 25 understand that they won't be required to get the 20 in 2024. And then when you go to renew in 25, the affirmations would need to be modified, appropriately based on whether or not they, obtain the 20.
So as a procedural matter, let me just interject for 1 second. And I
Go ahead.
appreciate the discussion from a procedural standpoint. Dr. Moore, do you have any other comments on this matter or any other comments you'd like to offer under our public comment period?
No, just looking at
Okay.
CPE audit data for 21 and 22, 18% of CPE was earned in the month of December. So there's evidence that shows people do wait.
Okay. Thank you very
But
much.
that's all I have to say.
Thank you. So this is a question, Laura, primarily for you. We are in the public comment period. Do we need to move back to committee, the licensing committee, from a procedural standpoint, or what shall we do?
Yeah, I think you could move for that committee. Yeah, I think you could move for that committee to reopen that vote if you wanted to
Okay.
amend, and then just take that vote again.
Okay.
This committee was properly noticed, so it's not like anyone's caught off guard. But yes, you could amend that if you wanted, or you could also just do it tomorrow at the full board meeting if you wanted to think about it. It's just however you want to deal with it.
Thank you. Madam Chair, your floor.
I think we need to discuss it it's not just a matter of a simple motion, so would it be better to do that now? You said we need a motion to reopen the committee meeting?
I think someone on the committee could make a motion to. It's confusing. I think someone on the committee could make a motion to put a new motion forward that would replace what was previously agreed on.
Or could we have a second motion? Because we've already decided on one matter.
Yeah, you
so
could have a second motion.
We could have a second
As long as
motion.
it's not, as long as it's not additional and it's not undoing anything that was done before.
Okay,
Yes.
so we can do that now?
Yeah.
All right, so here's what I'm thinking, though. What Karen said was, a lot of times they just waive the requirement that 20 of the hours had to be in the first year. So is there a sentiment about allowing this exception to be that for people in those counties, that that they will be allowed to get all their CPA hours in 2025 without a minimum in 2024? Does that make sense?
May I add something? I think the rule, thankfully, on extension of time gives the board flexibility and anticipates a lot of this. It essentially says that if there is good cause, the board can grant an extension. So I think maybe what we're doing here, what the board is doing here, is stating, as an official statement of the board, that victims of the hurricane have good cause. Good cause is established. If you're in one of the counties, either with your practice or your residents, or otherwise are affected by that hurricane. So I think if you, for example, make a notify statement to the industry that for the years 2024 and 2025, the hardships caused by the hurricane constitute good cause under this particular rule, then those people kind of have an automatic extension for completing their CPE. The way the rule is written, of course, they just simply have to submit a written request. I don't know what form that has to take. I'm anticipating, I suspect it's something very simple. May I please have a 6-month extension? That might be something that's established that's requested in an email. I don't know, Karen.
The other complication is how long. So Karen said that usually they're not comfortable granting more than 2 or 3 months. It's unusual to grant the full 6. So this served to grant the full 6 to people who have that cause. So I don't see a downside to the motion we've already made. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
The second one is a little fuzzier because it sounds like you do allow this frequently anyway. But maybe the statement you just said would be appropriate, and that would be all we would need to do for the 2025 is to say it does count as an exception, and then deal with that next year and leave this as it is.
If, one thing that we can do is for next year's renewals is change the question that says, did you earn at least 20 hours in 2024? If someone answers no, we can have a follow-up question that says, do you live or work in one of these affected counties? And then that would allow them to say, no, I did not get the CPE, but let us know that this is
I'm
the
comfortable with
reason
that
why.
if we clearly communicate that we're going to do that, because I could see that, I would panic when December's
Mm-hmm.
rolling around and I've got all these things I'm dealing with, and I would try to be scurrying to get the CPE, and we don't want that to happen.
NASBA can send an email for us to anyone who is due for renewal in 2025. That would,
Do we have another
The
balance sheet coming out anytime soon?
the balance sheet.
Balance sheet newsletter?
We're working on it.
I
but
mean, is it coming out before the end of the year?
Yes, ideally in November.
Okay.
So that could be added
Make that
to
a
the
big deal,
newsletter as well.
big banner.
I would
Yeah.
make a motion that we simply declare that those renewing in 2025 will be allowed to earn all their CPE credit in 2025.
Madam Chairman, you mean those living in or
affected.
working in the affected
Those
counties?
working in the
Yeah.
affected counties due to the extenuating circumstances brought by Hurricane Helene, those working or living in those counties will be allowed to earn all CPE credit in 2025. All those renewing in 25 will be allowed to receive all CPE credit in 2025.
Did you say effectively suspending the 20-hour rule for 2024?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Maybe comma,
That'd be
effectively.
I think our whole purpose here is to relieve the stress they're experiencing.
I agree with that. I'm just questioning, and this is maybe a legal point. Is the modality to do that the best served through a motion and an approval, or through giving discretion to the staff to deal with these as they come in?
But I think we have to publicize it.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that, but the publication going out in the newsletter, and then.
It's not official, you're saying.
Exactly, and then I don't think so, and then the actual, resolving of these or adjudicating of these cases happens in 2025 or in early 2026 on an as-needed basis. I'm indifferent, I'm just not sure, again, legally, can the board make a rule as we sit here today that says all CPE can be in 2025, or do we have to tether that to a rule that's on the books? That's maybe a new guy question.
I don't think it's just a new guy question, but I kind of like your approach. I think for the 20-hour issue that we're grappling with that Dr. Moore raised, we do have some time to deal with that, and we have some time to notify our licensees of that situation. And so what I would suggest is that the resolution we've already approved is fine, and I don't know that we need to really change that. But what we can also do is to say for those that live and work in the affected counties, when we're notifying, and perhaps when the Tennessee Society might publish an article about this to its members as well, that for those of you who are living in the affected counties and unable to acquire your required 20 hours of CPE in any given year of your 2-year renewal period, please notify the board, and we'll work to help you with an exception. We have a process to grant exceptions on that.
I have a thought on this. Since everybody renewing in 24 only gets 6 months, and that's what we're working under this rule, it seems to allow those who are renewing in 25 to get the whole 20 within a whole year is a little bit inconsistent. Could it be as simple as us approving for those living and working in those 6 counties who renew in 2025 that they have an additional 6-month extension to meet the required CPE requirements for 2024? And that the form that the state does for renewal in 25 just have the box to check so that there's a written request for that.
I would agree with that as well. I am pretty indifferent to the approaches. Karen had said that when someone reports a hardship in the prior year, that they often deal with it in the way that we're describing. But I started with what you're saying, and I'd be okay with that too. I think the question is, do we need a motion at all? Or the fact, I think the staff does deal with similar situations all the time. That's your point, Kevin. So you know what? Before our next meeting, I guess we can see if, well, it'd be too late. If that's my concern. I'm just afraid people are going to panic in December and start asking questions.
If we're communicating for those renewing at the end of 24, why wouldn't we go ahead and have a separate resolution or whatever the action is for those renewing in '25, so that when the communication is made, everybody knows there's a 6-month extension. Whatever your CPE requirements are for '24, whether you renew in '25 or renew in '24, you've got 6 months. And that falls directly under the rule that we're working with. And again, if we're going to modify the 12/31/24 renewal so that somebody checks a box that says, I'm requesting, the 6 months or whatever, you can modify the '25 renewal that says, I need the 6 months for the '24.
So you're saying take our original motion and simply say all CPE requirements?
No, I'm suggesting a second one that says basically the same thing as the first one says, that for those requirements for 2024, for those renewing in '25, you have a 6-month extension for whatever your CPE requirement is for '24. It's basically granting those who are renewing in '25 the exact same leniency you're giving those who are renewing in '24, which is 6 months to meet whatever the requirement was. And again, as far as administratively, whatever the staff does, but if administratively they're going to modify.
Is that any harder to carry out, Karen?
Likely. I'm still thinking through it. I have one suggestion, that what if we simply say that for those renewing at the end of '25, the requirement for a minimum of 20 hours in 2024 is being waived?
That seems to cover it. And then the only other thing I would add, is this in any way going to affect people who are maybe new for a renewal? Is there a requirement somehow that either a pro rata,
Well-
I may not know what I'm talking about, I'm just thinking somebody who doesn't have a full 2 years, does it affect their requirement in any way, what we're doing?
Someone who doesn't have the full 2-year requirement doesn't have a yearly minimum. So if someone who's licensed this year and is renewing at the end of next year doesn't have to earn any CPE in '24 at all.
So for those renewing in 2025, the minimum requirement of 20 CPE credits in 2024 is waived.
Provided they live or work in the counties that were designated.
Absolutely.
So what's the difference between what we're describing now and just making it much more simple and saying that all CPAs, regardless of when you're renewing, receive a 6-month extension on CPE that's
2024.
required in 2024 for those in the 6 or 8 counties that we're describing? Because that's really what we're saying, right? We're saying if you're renewing in '24, then you get a 6-month extension for what you had to have completed at the end of '24. If you're renewing in '25, you get a 6-month extension or a full waiver. You could do it however you guys see fit. But I think you could accomplish it with one sentence and just make it a 6-month extension for all CPAs with respect to CPE that was required to be earned in '24.
When you say
All CPAs in the designated areas.
Karen, would you read our motion back, our original one?
The original motion? Yes. A motion and second to recommend the board grant a 6-month CPE extension for the 2024 renewal to CPAs working or residing in Carter, Koch, Greene, Hamblin, Hawkins, Johnson, Unicoi, and Washington counties in Tennessee, directing staff to develop a process to accomplish this.
So how would you change that sentence instead of?
Yeah, so I think we would change it to remove the '24 renewal language and instead say for CPE required to be earned in '24. I think that would achieve what we're trying to accomplish.
Can you read that first sentence back then? if we do that?
So I believe that would be to grant a 6-month CPE extension for CPE required to be earned in 2024.
I like it.
So, to our legal staff, do we need to rescind that approved motion, or?
Someone probably needs to motion to amend. Yeah, somebody should make a new motion to have, because this is different.
But we
So
first
someone could
rescind this.
move to just put forward the motion that Sam just said.
But do we first rescind this one?
This is a lot of
course, it
procedure.
hasn't been
I haven't
pa-
done
it
this
hasn't
much
been
Robert's
passed by the
rules in
board
a
yet.
while, I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie.
I think the committee
I think you
could
could-
amend the
Yeah.
previously approved motion.
It hasn't gone to the board yet, so.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
So,
Sam, do you wanna
does
do that,
Mr.
since
Bennett
it's your wording?
move to amend the previous motion with the language he just put forward?
I bet he moves that.
Yes, I'll move that way.
Okay.
I will second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Do you feel good about that?
Thank you all.
You feel good? Okay.
And then can we put a recommendation? To Sam's point, or others, that people renewing in 25 are not likely seeking this information out, so that it recommend that this should be advertised through, if we can commandeer the Tennessee Society's newsletter or any other publications coming out from the board between now and the end of the year, so that anyone, as you rightfully point out, who is affected is not, hopefully gets the message that this takes a little of the pressure off to get the 20
And it
CPE.
will have to go on the form, I assume, next year.
Yeah, and actually, this question first presented itself to me from the TSCPA. So, Katie, I think the TSCPA would help us in advertising the information. Plus, we have the balance sheet coming forth. So we should be good there, right, Katie? Okay.
I still think we should mention, whether it's not in the motion or not, I think it still needs to be mentioned about the 20 hours. That includes a suspension of the 20 hours. Even if it's not in the motion, I just think it needs to be advertised that way.
Okay.
So,
All right. That concludes our second meeting.
Okay, thank you. So from a procedural standpoint, let's go back to the public comment period. And I'll ask Karen, did anyone offer or ask to speak, Karen, or offer comments?
No, sir.
Okay. So I believe we have no further business to conduct today, and so that will conclude.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, and I'm told, actually, I need to ask legal this, but a motion to adjourn under Robert's Rules of Order needs no second. That's what I've been told, but you can confirm that for us, but we could have a second just in case, right?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, and don't forget tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. if you can to have coffee and meet with our executive director candidate. Yes, yes.